Ladies and gentlemen, this video is an update about none other than Grandmaster Hans Niemann. I suppose previously on the GothamChess YouTube channel, the last update that we had was the game that he and I played against each other in the Chess.com Title Tuesday tournament. This video is going to be an update on something that I saw on social media about a week ago. It's currently July 2024. And also Hans Niemann is right now absolutely vaporizing the Turkish League of Chess. And he has officially broken into the top 20, top 25 players in the world, and he has reached his peak rating. And he is the man who coined the term, the chess speaks for itself. So we will be getting into all of that. First of all, a couple of months ago, a story came out where Hans was having trouble getting any sort of invitations to the St. Louis Chess Club, which is the most prestigious, area to play top-level chess in the United States. They organize many events, and it came out that he had destroyed some property at a hotel room, and this was somewhat of a big story because we don't have a lot of big stories in the chess world. And I made a video about it on my second channel. Now today, I'm going to be sharing with you something kind of related, tangentially related. Is that a thing? Sort of related. And I saw this on Twitter. Now this is from Chris Bird, who's an arbiter and involved a lot in chess. Good guy. I think I don't know Chris Bird, but I would imagine so. And he tweeted, the United States Chess Federation Ethics Committee moved to suspend Hans Niemann for a year for violations of the U.S. Code of Ethics. However, the executive board changed the punishment to a year of probation because Niemann took responsibility for his actions. Okay? And then, there's a comment down here. Was this about the hotel room? And, Chris says, I believe so, yes. Now, I'm going to blow this up real quick. And I'm going to move up here to cover, sorry. And basically, this says, a motion to suspend Hans Niemann's United States Chess Federation membership for a year and put the suspension in probationary status. Essentially what this is during the period of probation, should Niemann have another incident where his behavior brings disrepute on chess in a U.S. event or where he's representing USA in international competition, executive board may remove the probation and suspend his U.S. membership for at least a year. Now, Hans then tweeted that he's been trying to reach the club for a prolonged period of time. He posted kind of an open letter, if you will. I'm not going to read it word for word, but he says that, I strongly believe the St. Louis Chess Club was involved in the submission of an ethics complaint. Complaint was submitted with the intention of suspending my U.S. license, blacklisting me from all future chess events. And, this is kind of wild. This is the first thing that I would like to talk about, because let's just take what we know as public fact. Public fact. You can argue I'm an insider of the chess world, and yet I have zero insider information about anything that happened in St. Louis. I don't talk to anybody in the St. Louis Chess Club. I don't have a single contact at the St. Louis Chess Club. I know one person who lives in St. Louis, and his name is Eric Rosen. That's it. That's as much as I know about the St. Louis city, chess culture, etc. All we know publicly, and if you missed this detail, you can watch the previous video. Hans played a prestigious tournament. He, I suppose, was upset after a game, broke some private property at the Chase Park Plaza, the very fancy hotel where I think a lot of players stay when they play in St. Louis. Why does that warrant a 1-year suspension from the United States Chess Federation? Like, I get it. What he did was stupid. But he apparently paid for the damages, apologized, tipped the hotel staff. Like, whatever you think about Hans Niemann is the most polarizing figure in chess, maybe. Like, people on the comment sections of videos of about Hans Niemann are wild. And I've been very public with the fact that, like, guy was like 18, 19, all right, did some stupid stuff, particularly in this hotel. What? Why if that is all that happened, why are they trying to get him suspended for a year? Now, if that's not all that happened and the public doesn't know, oh, but, Hans was writing emails every day saying crazy things. Okay, but none of that seems real. That doesn't seem like the reality. I find this a bit crazy. Like, the guy is whatever. You could say he has a temper, etc. I think athletes have done far worse. They've probably destroyed property. Like, they've smashed things. They've gotten code violations or broken regulations, and then they maybe get suspended for, like, a game by the team. But, like, what? This is wild. Now, I'm happy that he's on probation and isn't suspended for a year, if that's all that happened. Now, on a slightly better note, Hans is currently playing in the Turkish league. And again, I'm just going to summarize everything that I'm saying with, he's not off the hook. I'm not saying every single top chess junior should go destroying things in their hotel room, but like getting suspended for a year by your local federation or almost suspended for a year, I just, now, once again, this is all the publicly available information that we have. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes. We don't know who's telling the full truth or the half-truths or whatever, but I just found that a bit harsh. And it's okay if you disagree. It's okay. It's okay. I don't know. I was like, man, I thought we were past this. So, Hans is currently playing in the Turkish Super League. I think that's the name of it. I don't know if it's super or not. And basically, it's a team format event. And Hans is beating a lot of really exceptional players, one of whom is Yu Yangyi, the third best chess player in China, behind Wei Yi and Ding Liren, the world champion. And his games have been very exciting, and I'm going to share them with you. And he's at his highest rating of his life, which is 2,000. You could look at number 25, 26, 2,712. And it's actually even higher than that. I think it was like 2,715, and that was, he just made a couple of draws. So crazy stuff in his life. And listen, I ultimately hope it resolves itself. I don't know what my relationship is with Hans. Like, one day he's supporting me and the next day he's like insulting me. And I don't know. It's kind of reminds me of my childhood with my parents. No. Okay, here we go. Hans in the Super League of Turkey. So he had round number 1. He's playing Gleb Dudyan, who I covered a game of his against Gleb earlier, like this year or maybe late last year. This one is a Rossalimo Sicilian, and Hans takes on c6. The point is to damage the pawns of black, and then it's to put a bunch of pawns on the light squares, which he does, like this. And basically, you try to play against black's doubled pawns. Knight a3 is designed to control this. Maybe you want to play c4 in the future. Maybe the knight comes back around this way, instead of developing the knight to this traditional square. And play gets really spicy early. I guess there's no timestamps on these games, which is weird, because they play with clocks. So I don't know why the timestamps are not there, but it is what it is. And here, yeah, Gleb does something kind of wild. He allows Hans to take and damage his pawns, and now he's got two doubled pawns, isolated pawns, and potentially weak pawns. And Hans here just plays an absolute masterclass of a positional game. He plays pawn c3, and the point of pawn c3 is now this pawn, and you'll see this a lot in Grandmaster games, they do what's called keeping the tension. The point being, neither side wants to take. If you take, the other guy goes here, and yes, you can actually win a pawn, but the position that you get after this with rook e8 on the way and counterplay on the way and all this and all these different things, not very good. And you also know that the other guy doesn't want to take, because then he gives himself 2 sets of doubled isolated pawns, which is terrible. You'll notice the evaluation goes to +2 if black takes on e4. If black makes a pawn trade, he is positionally lost. King h7, and now Hans just very slowly pokes at the black position. Here, I think black needed to play knight d7. Instead of that, he went queen a5. Now Hans shuts down the center of the board and plays pawn to d4, and black is totally stuck. Even though his knight can come to f4, which it does, the knight is basically stuck there. It is a sitting duck. And now pawn to b4. This pawn now has to move, and Hans is attacking the weaknesses. And black simply has too many pawns stuck at home. He has no pawn play at all. So he tries to create counterplay. Hans very patiently keeps putting some more pressure on this side of the board, and at some point, he's going to collect. He takes the knight to d3. He's going to plop the knight on c5. You just simply cannot defend the pawn on e6. But first, he makes a couple of improving moves to make sure everything is protected. Black goes for counterplay. There's knight to c5. a4. Again, he's not rushing. The pawn on e6 is not going anywhere. Now he takes. Knight c5. Notice how Gleb literally, and I really mean literally, got absolutely nowhere with his pawns. God gave him 8 pawns. What did he do with them? They just kind of stood around. They just kind of stood around. You know, one of them got traded off, and the rest of them could not move. Just kind of fascinating, like what it all comes down to at the high level. Hans just, I mean, again, like he pushed one pawn to h4, but 7 of the remaining pawns could not move. Hans collects one of them, and ultimately Black just has to sacrifice material to try to get some counterplay. It's very normal stuff, like you give up a rook for a piece, and now the pawns start moving, but now it's cleanup time. Now it's cleanup time for Hans. Gets the queens off the board. Yes, we get some pawn play, but it's a little bit too late. King f1, rook b7, and it's just a matter of time until the rest of the pawns fall off. Now Black has absolutely no moves. Can't move his rook, can't move his bishop, and this one's going to end very soon as Black loses the remainder of his pawns and the game. And I found this one absolutely fascinating because when I say literally, Black had 7 pawns that did not move. You could even argue the 8th pawn did not move. The pawn on c5, which took on b4. This is the most incredible thing about this game. The pawn on c5 was the pawn that moved there on move 1. Then the pawn stood there. It stood there, it stood there, it stood there. It stood there as the position locked up. Now Hans threatened it, and from here, yeah, Black got a couple of pawn pushes, and that was it. Masterclass game. Total positional domination. Now, the next game that Hans played was not particularly interesting. He was playing Rauf Mamedov, who's an Azerbaijani grandmaster, very strong player. And in this game, White went for a 4-knight scotch. And at the high level, this is generally a draw offer. Hans is playing with the black pieces. They get an absolute main line. And from the opening, they get a position where Rauf gave him a pawn. So actually, Rauf is a pawn down. He has 6 pawns. Hans has 7. But Hans has damaged structure, and White very clearly has a better bishop. I mean, the bishop is just pointing directly at the king, right? So I think White just basically wanted slightly nagging pressure, and he wanted kind of a very low-risk position. He put his queens and, did all of this in the center. But somehow, Hans then put 6 pawns out of 7 on dark squares. So he's repelling the dark square bishop on the other side. And then let's not forget, the more time that goes by, Hans is a pawn up. Like, we can't forget about that. White did not handle this particularly well, and suddenly, after a little bit of maneuvering and giving a pawn away, oops, it is actually Hans Niemann who has the attack. Complete reversal. And I feel like what happened in this game, it's like, remember, it's a league, so it's a team. So I think Mamedov was just thinking, okay, I'm going to draw Hans Niemann because he's the best player on his team, and the rest of my team will go to work. And they very well might have won the match. I have to check the standings, but he kind of went for this position, which is, you would think low risk and etc. But he didn't handle the ensuing middle game correctly. It almost felt like he was treading this line of like, I'm fine with a draw. I'm not going to take any risk. Yeah, but Hans Niemann, he's a very uncompromising player, right? And Queen c7, he doesn't trade the queens. He's now down a pawn again. So not again. He's now down a pawn. He was up a pawn. Now he's down a pawn. Rauf goes for complications here by trying to give up a rook. Can't take with the queen. Can't take with the queen because this, but boom. And this is really nasty because after rook e8, you just play king h7. It's pretty gross. And that's mate. And if the queen protects with queen b7, you don't actually take the rook. Look at this. This is disgusting. The queen threatens mate. Protects the rook, which blocks the queen. Queen g2 is an unstoppable mate. Probably White has to sack the queen. If he doesn't, the attack is roaring. Queen b8. Now this is mate, but it's actually Hans Niemann who gets there first. And again, White is playing without a rook and a bishop. I mean, they are standing on the edges of the board. And in this case, it's just not any good. Rook e2, he wins the queen, and the king is just wide open. King's wide open. There are forks. I mean, I'm just drawing a million arrows. There are forks everywhere on the board. Bishop g4, bishop f5, queen g4, and here white resigns. And white resigns because let's say king f2, king h4. If you put your king anywhere here, this is a fork that wins the rook. If you put your king here, my bishop gets in. If you put your king on g1, this is a fork. That's a triple fork. And yeah, I mean, this one was like, you know, Hans just took what came to him. Ralph Mamedov played this line, which was a bit boring-ish. And Hans was like, all right, I'm going to take my chance. And he won this one as well. Now here he's playing 2470. So the win is, you know, mildly less impressive. But you can still argue it is quite impressive, actually. Knight to e2. Knight bd7. Very solid Queen's Gambit declined. Now, we saw how Hans plays in a dynamic tactical environment. Let's see how he maneuvers in a Queen's Gambit declined. Yeah, b5 is a very courageous move by black, but you kind of leave this pawn. And generally, you know, b5 is kind of useful, like very arbitrarily speaking. If b4 is played, then b5 is nice. But even then, b5 is risky if a4 is possible. Because after a4 here, there are many lines where you can play a5, and there is no way for black to get the knight to b6. So I'm trying to teach you all something. If black in the Queen's Gambit decline is able to put the knight on c4, then black is very happy. However, if with black you play b5, but there is no way to get a knight to c4, you are oftentimes just creating a weakness for yourself. And, well, let's watch how a 2700 exploits that. He immediately attacks the pawns. He plays knight b1. And black now has to just hold on tight. I mean, roller coaster style. You know, like hold on for dear life. Instead, he plays queen b6, knight d2, bishop a6. You'll notice that the pawn is not moving. The pawn is not moving from c6. Knight f3, knight f4. The pawn has got to go. I mean, you have got to mobilize this pawn. Instead, we trade the knights. Black plays knight d7. He's trying to prepare it, but all of a sudden, he's getting hit with the bishop here. So Hans is removing. And by the way, that's just the hanging rook. Now look at this. He takes, puts the knight on e5 while this rook is still hanging. Rook c7, and he doesn't. I mean, the rook is still hanging because now he threatens f7. You cannot play g6 because I'm going to sacrifice. I also have queen h6. Rook f8, rook d1, and now you're not in time to ever get rid of your weakness, right? You're never in time. And while you have all of that going on, I can already begin creating an attack over here. Hans plays rook d2, maybe looking to go this way. Bishop d6, rook c2, everlasting pressure, queen g4. Now is the final moment. Black can still maybe get away with the move c5. It's very complicated because there is bishop h6. But obviously, he plays the human move. Hans gives a check and comes back, and then plays this move b3. And finally, black, just in the nick of time, plays this move, looking to create the complications. But we have dc, rook c5, rook c5, rook c5. And black actually handled it incorrectly. Here he had to take with the bishop. The final moment, and the reason being that once everything is traded, it looks like the pressure is alleviated. It looks like Hans has only been left with 3 pieces. What can he possibly do with 3 pieces? He can play knight d7. He's threatening the bishop, and if the bishop moves to safety, you are just mated. There is nothing you can do. You play f6, I force you back, takes, queen e7, and your bishop is swinging and missing. To take a term from baseball. I don't know if they say that in cricket too, but swinging and missing. There is absolutely nothing there. You get all the way down here. There is nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I am mating you much faster than you are checkmating me. So bishop e5, g6, queen f4, bishop d4, and you cannot stop. You cannot stop the H train. It is just arriving in the station. By the way, that knight is absolutely free. You are not hallucinating. But, you know, mate is stoppable if you play like g5, but then you will lose your bishop. So this game was just, you know, it was just a Queen's Gambit decline where black slightly misplayed the pawn play on the queen side, and Hans tortured him for 3 hours. Just was like, you cannot play on the queen side. You got to be brave, and he wasn't brave, and Hans won this one. Hans, of course, made a couple of draws as well. He didn't win every single game. He also lost the game to Aydin Süleymanli, I believe, from also Azerbaijan. This one was against Mustafa Yilmaz, one of the best Turkish grandmasters, and they are in Turkey. This one a bit more of a positional e4, e5 game, which then opened up in the center with d5 and pawn takes, and then d4. Very standard stuff. It was trending along the lines of being in equal position, but Hans gave black an isolated pawn. He gave up his bishop, and now this pawn is in the center of the board, and he's quite good at exploiting these positional weaknesses, right? I mean, here he's doing it. He didn't really do it against Ralph. It was a very complicated game. Here he did it. So you see how he's combining tactical motifs with sort of a positional undertone. And at this level, you know, you have to have a universal style. You have to be able to play many, many types of positions. We've got an isolated pawn. We've got a frozen structure. Let's see if he's able to capitalize. I mean, it is an equal position. It's not like anybody did anything crazy yet. He tries to, you know, improve and trying to transform the structure a little bit, which he does. Now he starts bringing his king. You actually cannot take this pawn because rook a2, knight c4. And this endgame with rook a4, rook c4 is better for white. It's better for white because these pawns are very weak. And this pawn's not going anywhere. Rook a8, rook c4, you don't have time to push. Right? Now if you go here, maybe I come back or play rook c6. It's still probably equal, but it's, you know, getting a little bit difficult practically speaking. And just watch as Hans just puts on the pressure. Rook d4 against the isolated pawn, c4 against the isolated pawn, transforms the structure to this endgame, picks this up, and has the pass b pawn, and now he's got all the winning chances in the world because he's got the more active king. His king is close to the center of the board. Argument to be made that he should have started bringing his king already, but he plays b6. You may be wondering why black did not take on b2. That's because of f4, stopping the bishop from returning to the square. And the only way you can defend yourself here is this, but then you would probably lose. So b6, king f8, bishop comes back. And black resigns. See, why black resign? I don't get bishop e8, so what? King e4, bishop e5. So here, king d5, king d7. First of all, you can lose this pawn. Second of all, I probably just walk my king over here. So if you go here, king c6, complete domination. Right? And these pawns are stuck. b7 is the next move. Let's say black plays h4, b7, king d8, check here. And then you very slowly get this bishop. You could probably just queen as well. But you could probably go here and here. Maybe not exactly, but that's sort of the point. And Hans beats Yilmaz. Again, positional game, playing against his weaknesses, just expertly done. I mean, really, Yilmaz is one of the best players from Turkey. Turkey, I think, is the recent change. 2 more games, by the way. I mean, this is unbelievable. He beat this young prodigy from Iran, 2500 IM, probably will be GM quite soon, Golami. This one was a neo-Catalan turned into a Catalan. Golami played a very confrontational system where you take the pawn and play c5. So you basically take the pawn that white is offering in this Catalan, and then you try to, you know, be aggressive against it. Right? And then you play like bishop d7, b5, c4, and black is playing for this queenside structure. Hans, meanwhile, does what you're supposed to do in this position, which is play for the center and maybe go straight, you know, run it down mid like Tyler 1 would. And that's basically how the game ends. So in the next 5 moves, 1, each player gets a move. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We run it straight down the middle of the board, and clearly white understood the position better than his opponent. Oops, Hans has no profile photo here. Okay, well, it's the same guy. Yeah, I mean, just knight c6, just straight down the middle of the board, right? Just straight down, like what we can do. That we're gonna get a pass pawn probably, so yeah, there it is. Now we have to trade the queen, get rid of the queen. Here comes queen e2, and here comes queen e5. Position is incredibly easy to understand, right? Like if I told you, okay, the guy's got 2 pawns in the center of the board, and his pieces support the center, so what should he do? He should go straight down the middle of the board. And just like in the Gleb game, just like, look at black's pawns. They almost never moved. These pawns almost never moved. d6, bishop c6, he's just getting rid of black's pieces. Knight c6, rook e7, knight e5. Took an f7, black resigned. Again, it's actually kind of incredible. Like, yeah, you play the pawns in the opening. That's the opening. We're not gonna worry about these moves because it's the opening, right? Queen a4, get the pawn back. Now black plays b5, c4. And from this point forward, black doesn't have another pawn move. Like a useful one. 11 moves. The game ends in 20 moves. Black literally, and I mean quite literally, did not have a... Okay, taking doesn't really count. And then black played g6 later in the game. And it's just incredible how Hans just freezes people. Like, he has this... It's like they're too scared to throw punches. It's the way that he plays... He gets people so tentative. Now, I'm not saying there was a moment in this game that black could have maybe done something, exceptional. I'm not. He just kind of chose the wrong plan. Like here, he could have played b4. If he wanted to, he could have played b4. But he probably rejected it because he was like, well, I'm opening up the position. I'm weakening my structure. So he didn't go for b4, right? He kind of castled. He said, he put his knight on b3, which looks good. It's not the right plan, though. It's not the right plan. White got too much time and got to play this move d5 and just... straight down the middle of the board, and just blew him off the board, totally. You may say, why did black resign? Knight b2, rook e1. You say, why did black resign? He gets the pass pawn, knight h6, and then if here, d7. Like, you just lose. You're not fast enough. Not fast enough. And the most impressive win of the entire event, by far, Yu Yangyi 27-20. I mean, Yu Yangyi is one of the best players in the world. Very experienced. I think his peak is like 27-50, maybe even higher. He's played in Grand Prix. I don't think he's played the candidates. I don't believe he's played the candidates. I'm not sure how close he's been to qualifying. Now, you'll notice in this game, Yu Yangyi just plays like very, ready. He just plays, he doesn't commit any center pawns. Then he plays c4. And now he has the option to play d4, but he doesn't. He actually plays something I've never seen. I've never seen this. He plays takes b3. I've never seen this before. Most people play b3. Then the best move for black is either c5 or d4. d4 leads to very confrontational stuff after, like, for example, e3, c5, and then there's this line knight to e5, trying to kind of put some pressure. Queen c7, you can play f4, by the way, with white. You can also put the knight on, you can take, play f4, play knight back to d3. There's a lot of lines. Rook e1, queen e2. He takes, though. Now, black can still play d4, but now there's no pawn here. So it's a worse version. It's a worse version because white will very quickly get the rook on the c file, play knight c4, stuff like that. Hans plays bishop f5, knight d7, h6. So now this bishop can get out. He's going to probably play pawn to c6 as well. Knight bd2, he puts the bishop back on h7. And we just have a we have a game which is kind of like a feeling out process. And Benji just went to sleep in the corner because the game's a bit boring for him. But black is better. Black is better because this is not the critical plan for white. It's not the critical plan to take, leave your opponent with the center pawn. So now white doesn't have a center pawn, right? His pawns are kind of back further. And, he's making, but now Hans takes the center. He's like, well, if you're going to offer me the center, I'm going to take the center. Queen b1, rook c8, bishop h3 from a distance. Now Hans locks it down. This is a declaration of hostility. Like, he's like, I'm tired of you not playing in the center. If you want me to take over the board, I will. e3. Hans plays this move b5. This is a deep concept. This pawn is being given up. But his point is he's going to go c4. He's going to sneak past the pawns, utilizing this diagonal. If take, you're in trouble. You can't take with the knight. Because first I can just trade here and then rook c4. So you just lose the... This is very unpleasant. So b5, Yu Yangyi plays e4, g5. Oh my. Oh my goodness, look at this. He's threatening a fork. This is unbelievable. Unbelievable stuff. The bishop goes back to g2. He tries to put more pressure on that side of the board and then puts his knight into the center. Yu Yangyi tries to break through with f4. This is crazy. Hans takes en passant. His king is wide open, opening up the king, taking risks with the black pieces. He's sensing a level of hesitation from his opponent. Knight goes to g4. They trade. Yu Yangyi trying to trade off the powerful knight. Now Hans reactivates his bishop, which he brought back earlier in the game. Now we have a position with no knights, but the queenside pawns are arriving. I mean, that is why Hans played b5. He played b5 to play c4. Take. White's center is on the verge of collapse. He's trying to defend himself, but in comes the queen. And the queen's not just staring at the rook. It's also staring this way. It's also ready to rotate. That's the thing. The queen's ready to go any direction it wants. Bishop d2, queen c5. Now I've got eyes over here. I've got eyes to go down to c2. White is worse. Queen b3. We make a small improving move, bishop g6. Bishop g6 is very clever. Number one, you're looking to go over here. You're also looking to go king h7. You're actually also looking to put the king behind where the bishop was and maybe use the g file. White plays a4. He doesn't really know what to do. Queen c7, king h7. Very tense position. Like, clearly black is doing well, but where's the breakthrough? He goes to the second rank, but where's the breakthrough? Bishop d1. Now he has to come back. Queen c6. Now Yu Yangyi tries to offer a queen trade because he doesn't like how powerful Han's queen is. Hans drives to a4, but then he comes back. He's like, I'm not gonna go just yet. Queen b7. No queen trade. Hans does not want a queen trade. Queen b5. The queen goes to e6. Three things are staring at e4. Rook goes to e1. Now the rook takes over the c-file. Where is Hans's breakthrough? Queen b3. Bishop back to e2. Very tense game. Both guys are like trying not to blunder anything. Rook c1. Now Yu Yangyi decides, oh, okay, this is an improvement. I've gotten rid of Hans's rook, and I'm the one under pressure. Bishop f5. And now here's the breakthrough. Rook e4. Sacrificing the rook. This is a massive decision. If bishop takes, I take with a pawn. My king is completely safe. My king is so safe. And I'm a pawn up. So instead of that, Yu Yangyi naturally takes the rook. But what about the king, right? What about the light squares by the king? Not to mention the fact that the rook is trapped. So rather than even playing anything else, Hans takes and plays queen c2. And the bishop is hanging, back rank problems, pawn is going. Queen f7, that's the fatal mistake. Yu Yangyi thought this was a perpetual check. Instead, something like queen f4, maybe you're going to be able to defend yourself. It is very unpleasant, but Yu Yangyi felt the game was slipping. So he went queen f7, he gives up the bishop, he thinks it's a perpetual check, but it's not, because the king is able to just walk and walk and walk, and you may need to give up the bishop, but maybe not. But maybe. What's he gonna do? And there he goes, he's parting with the bishop. He's parting with the bishop, because if you ever take it, I'm mating you. So queen f1, king e3, queen f4, the king has escaped, the bishop can't even be taken, and now the king is simply safe. Takes, queen e3, pawn d3. Pawn is there. That's it. That's the end of the game. And on move 75, Yu Yangyi resigned. Hans blocked everything. This is a check. That's a check. And the pawn is going to queen. And he beat Yu Yangyi. I mean, this was a wild game. This was a wild game. Hans played for b5. He played for g5. I mean, he clearly took advantage of an opponent that was trying to be a bit tentative, trying to be a bit slow. And we saw the same thing a bit with Ralph. Like, when these guys try to play subduing type of chess, Hans has a way to weasel out of there and then just start getting at you. I mean, b5 and g5 is I mean, you give him the space, he's going to take it. And yeah, Hans up to 27-20. And circling back to the earlier topic in this video, again, comment sections on these videos are crazy. Some people are like, yeah, go Hans, and then you guys tell me I was terrible for how I handled the last like year of coverage, and I'm like, I completely disagree, by the way. I think I was pretty fair in giving him a chance. But then there's also the people that are like, stop covering Hans, I hate Hans. Well, I'm not going to stop. I think he's a fascinating individual in the world of chess. I also think trying to get his membership suspended for a year is bananas. I don't... Again, granted, I have no idea what's gone on in private. So, yeah, I think it's not fair, and it's kind of interesting to see him go off to these tournaments and have very, very good results, and you know, give it a year or two. I mean, I think we could be looking at Hans the candidate, which is a wild timeline. So, that's a Hans Niemann update for you. I'll see you in the next video. Get out of here.